You ever stop and wonder how your workplace actually got to be, well, the way it is? I mean, why do we have things like performance reviews or endless team meetings or even managers at all? It's a great question. And we're going to dive right in because the way we all work today, it's really the result of this incredible 100-year-long argument about what a job should even be.
I mean, think about it. You know that boss, right? The one who's obsessed with every tiny detail, tracking every minute of your day, absolutely convinced that there is only one right way to do things, their way. And then you've got the complete opposite, the boss who trusts you, who cares about the results, not how you got there, and is totally cool with you working from wherever you feel most productive. What gives?
Well, the difference between those two managers isn't just, their personality. It's actually about two powerful, competing ideas that have been battling it out for over a century. And to really get a handle on your job today, we've got to go back, way back, to the beginning.
Okay, so picture this. It's the early 1900s, and there's one idea that's completely taking over, and that idea is efficiency. The main goal was to build companies that ran like perfect, well-oiled machines. Every single part, every person, working in the absolute most optimal way possible. This whole era was known as the classical movement.
And the big name, the absolute star of this show, was an engineer named Frederick W. Taylor. Now, Taylor looked at a job, and he didn't see a craft or a skill. Nope, he saw an engineering problem to be solved. He was convinced that for any task, whether it's shoveling coal or building a car, there had to be one single, scientifically proven, best way to do it.
And his method, which he called scientific management, was super systematic. It basically boiled down to 4 key principles. First, you use science, stopwatches, observation to figure out that one best way for every single task. Second, you find the right worker for that job and train them to do it exactly that way. Third, you make sure they stick to the plan, no deviations. And finally, number 4, you create a very clear split. Managers do all the thinking, and the workers, well, they just do the doing.
But here's the thing. Not everyone was buying into this efficiency at all costs mindset. Even way before Taylor, there were people pushing back. There was this reformer named Robert Owen, who was, literally 100 years ahead of his time. He was arguing for something completely different. He said, hey, maybe investing in your people, giving them good hours, safe conditions, even education is actually the best way to make a profit. Now, back then, that was a totally radical idea, but it planted a seed that would, take a long, long time to grow.
So, while Taylor was focused on the perfect process, another big thinker was obsessed with the perfect structure. And that brings us to Max Weber and his big idea, bureaucracy. Now, I know, today that word makes us all groan, but you have to understand, for Weber, it wasn't a bad thing. It was the most logical, fair, and efficient way to get a big group of people to work together.
So what was the point of all these rules? Well, the goal was to make things fair and predictable. A clear hierarchy meant you always knew who your boss was. Formal rules meant everyone followed the same procedures. And maybe most importantly, you got your job based on what you could do, not who you were related to. It was all about creating order and consistency, especially as companies got bigger and bigger. But as anyone who has ever tried to get a simple form approved knows, the cracks in the system started to show. All that rigidity made it super slow to adapt to change. The obsession with rules could kill creativity and new ideas. And this very impersonal, machine-like way of treating people, well, it created a whole new set of problems. It was pretty clear something had to change.
And those problems led us straight into our next big chapter, the human relations revolution. This was, for real, a collective aha moment. It's the point where everyone, managers, researchers, you name it, finally realized, wait a minute, these workers aren't just cogs in a machine. They're people.
And that shift in thinking was absolutely massive. We went from this old view of the worker as a totally rational, isolated part of the machine, to seeing them as a social person who is influenced by their feelings, by the people around them, by their relationships. All of a sudden, things like morale, friendships at work, and a sense of belonging weren't just nice-to-haves. They were seen as critical for success.
And the craziest part? This whole revolution basically started by accident. It all kicked off with a series of experiments that were actually designed to prove the old way of thinking. Researchers were trying to find the perfect physical setup for workers. Things like how bright the light should be.
So, these became known as the Hawthorne studies. And they were wild. First, the researchers played with the lighting. They made it brighter, productivity went up. They made it dimmer, productivity still went up. It made no sense. Then, they took a small group of workers, gave them a friendly supervisor, and just, paid attention to them. Bam! Productivity shot through the roof. And in a final study, they realized that the informal social group, the peer pressure among coworkers, was way more powerful than any official company bonus.
This all led to a huge discovery that we now call the Hawthorne effect. And here's the mind-blowing conclusion. It wasn't the lights. It wasn't the physical conditions at all. It was the attention. The simple fact that someone was watching them, that they felt seen and cared about, that's what made them work better. And that realization, it changed everything.
So, once that door was kicked open, the idea that people's feelings and thoughts actually matter at work, it led to a brand new question. What is it that really makes people tick? What actually motivates us to get out of bed and do a good job?
This is where a bunch of psychologists stepped in, most famously Abraham Maslow. He came up with his famous hierarchy of needs, which is basically this pyramid. The idea is simple. You can't even think about things like personal growth or creativity if your more basic needs, like safety or feeling like you belong, aren't met first. For bosses, the message was clear. A paycheck is just the bottom of the pyramid. You also have to provide security, a sense of community, and recognition if you want people to be truly motivated.
Then you get Douglas McGregor, who just laid out the whole debate perfectly with something he called Theory X and Theory Y. Think of it this way. Theory X is our micromanager from the beginning of the story. This boss believes people are fundamentally lazy and have to be forced to work. But the Theory Y manager, that's our other boss. This one believes that people are naturally driven and want to do a good job. And here's the genius part. McGregor said that whichever way you treat people, it often becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
And wrapping up this wave of thinking is Frederick Herzberg, who gave us this super practical idea. He said there are two types of factors at work. First, you have hygiene factors. These are things like your salary or your working conditions. They don't make you love your job, but if they're bad, you'll definitely hate it. They just prevent dissatisfaction. Then you have the motivators. These are the things that actually create satisfaction, a sense of achievement, getting recognized, doing work that matters. His point was, you need the hygiene stuff, but without the motivators, you'll never be truly passionate about your work.
Okay, so why this big trip down memory lane? Why does 100 years of management theory matter to you? Because this isn't just dusty old history. It's literally the operating system running in the background of your job, right now. When you understand this history, you get a kind of toolkit for work. It helps you see why a super rigid, by-the-book approach might be perfect for, say, safety procedures, but a total disaster for a creative brainstorming session. It shows us that you can't just have one or the other. You need both good systems and a real understanding of people to make a great workplace.
Think about it. Every time you have a meeting about company culture, that's a direct echo of the Hawthorne studies. Every time there's a debate about the most efficient way to do a task, that's Taylor's ghost in the machine. Every single part of your modern job is built on the foundation of these old ideas. And that brings us to one last big question. We've gone on this incredible journey from treating workers like parts of a machine to finally understanding their humanity. So now, as AI starts to become less of a tool and more of a teammate, how is that going to change everything all over again? What will the next revolution in work even look like?